Pat Wright has been a parent educator in the Twin Cities for 25 years. She became a state advocate for the disabled in 2001 and was trained in 2010 through 2012 at Boston University to be a national advocate. She's the chair of the Family Committee for ISPS, and she also has been suffering laryngitis, so she's going to speak up as best she can. So without further ado, let me hand it over to Pat.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad that I still have a voice because, after all, I worked really hard for a lot of years to have a voice, and it was kind of ironic this morning that I wasn't going to have it. I was also in a bit of a crisis getting here. I'm staying away from the hotel and didn't time the train right and whatnot, and so I was getting down here, and I realized, crisis, that's what family members know all about, is crisis, how to live in a crisis. I mean, I've developed a lot of skills out of living through a lot of crises, like many of you. So that felt normal. I had to find my timer. Okay, we're very happy to be here and grateful to offer a family plenary once again. This time, we wanted to add people from the community that families can interact with along the journey of psychosis. Not all families, but maybe many families, it's fair to say. So we're going to have somebody from the criminal justice system, which I thought needed to be done, because many of us have interactions with people from that field, as well as a therapist and another parent. We did have somebody that was representing Windhorse that unfortunately wasn't able to be here this morning. She's not doing well. So, thank you so much yesterday. I don't know if any of the experts by experience panel members are here, but I was just so moved by that presentation. It was just so inspiring. Just to get up every day and have the courage to face that walk. Although I've been surrounded by relatives with a lot of money, I've been mostly on government programs, which qualified me as well as motivated me to be an advocate in the disability field several years ago. Since I loved learning, I put myself through a few degree programs and therefore felt it was my duty to speak up for others who were unable to represent themselves for whatever reason. My mom had been on welfare after she and my dad had separated with my younger siblings after I left home. My dad was alcoholic and actually died at the age of 52 of a chronic alcoholic, so his career was stopped short by the alcoholism. Okay, so this is my first PowerPoint, so I'm really excited. And I couldn't handle all this by myself, so I have a person that I'm doing this to, so that's what that is. I don't have like a thing with my arm or anything. So this is my mom's 90th birthday about a year ago. This is before crisis. This is my view. Everyone has their own story. It was much bigger, but somehow I cropped a bunch of people out of there and couldn't regroup it. So anyway, here it is. There she is. We have lots of people of color in my family. Of course, we have different ages, different abilities. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to use this slide, this photo. So before the crisis, supposedly. My son Gabe went to the hospital. It's okay if I use his name. I talked to him about that, and he says, if it's going to help people, just go for it, Mom. So he went to the hospital the first time in 2009. It was the first episode program in the Twin Cities in a hospital because, that's what was available. So he did, he was told to be on medication right away for the rest of his life, which I kind of thought, really? Like, he's 20. But we all know that story. So I met, they were just starting this first episode program at the hospital. So I met other parents. That's why I learn. I find people and I learn with other people when I go through things. And I quickly realized that this wasn't going to be for me. I needed a much more broader, holistic approach. I'd gone through my own Western medicine, I'm going to call it a nightmare, and found a lot of other healing in other ways with much fewer consequences. And I wanted the same for him, but, wasn't available at the time. So ISPS really fulfilled that need for me. I got to the first conference in 2012, asked Karen if we could have an informal family meeting at lunch, which we did, and I realized, oh my gosh, families really need a place to come together and meet and talk and network. So I've been here ever since. I'm a educator in, as Jessica mentioned, in Minneapolis and St. Paul schools in a family program. And I found these advocacy programs partly because of my own health issues and whatnot. And I needed to find something besides the medical model. So that's been very empowering. So the theme of the previous slide, was family, all together. So then we have a crisis, and this can manifest in many ways. I think for my son, he's a really sweet kid and friendly, and teachers liked him, and friends liked him, and he was a people pleaser. He was bright, very athletic, and did a lot of marijuana using in high school, which isn't uncommon, but I think there was probably some predisposition there, and I have other relatives that have had psychosis. So something happens, and so in 2009, he ended up, actually we brought him to the hospital for a drug assessment because he wanted to live at my house, and that was a condition that he at least get this assessment. And the assessor said, out to us in the lobby, or the waiting room, by the way, he's in psychosis, and I think he needs to go upstairs. And I was like the rug pulled out from under me. I knew all about depression and anxiety and all sorts of other things, but psychosis, although I have a sister that suicided in 2002, we didn't talk about her as having psychosis. We knew she heard voices, but so anyway. So moving right along, the crisis happens, and what do we do now? Unfortunately, my son went to too many doctor's appointments with me when he was small, rather than, playing and running around and throwing food and bouncing off the walls like a lot of other little 2- and 3-year-old guys. He was sitting next to me on the couch because I was laid out for quite a long time, anemic and all sorts of other things going on. And he would, color me pictures. So it was very, very sweet, but that's, caught up with them later. And we've talked about that, fortunately. We have a really good communication, and I'm really grateful for that. He has a great team of people that are able to see him for who he is and accept, whatever's going on with him in the moment. And I attribute a lot of his recovery to that. So let's see. Okay. And there's 2 medical nurses, because I couldn't get rid of them either. Obviously, I need some help with my PowerPoint. But I thought, well, I have my whole network of people, and then that's kind of the point of this slide is from that cohesive family, then, things happen. People get alienated. People get separated. They're kind of living in their own world, trying to find out for themselves what happened before we can kind of all come back together. And, of course, we are all together, which is the part that makes it really difficult. A lot of stress, isolation, fear. Oh, I just realized I can look down here and see the slide. Okay. So because I have a daughter too, by the way. She's a couple years older than my son. I don't want to leave her out of this. My ex-husband and I had been divorced for several years before this happened. And in a way, that was a relief because we didn't really see things the same. He was very medical, modelized. Let's just leave it like that. Because I think that happens with parents. You know, people see it differently at different times. And I certainly want to say that there's a time and a place for the medical model. I get so anti and I forget, the rooms that I'm in here. So definitely, there's definitely a time and a place. So his being on this medication and immersed in this medical model really challenged me to be accepting and advocating of him, also wanting him to feel free about, well, what your options are. But it's hard to feel free about your options when your people, are saying this is what you've got to do. And he had been committed and, forced, so then it became a legal issue. So that was a lot of stress and tension, for all of us, and trying to make that decision. So I think one of the best things for me about him having a group of people that I know he trusts and that he can talk to and that I can talk to and they can hear me, which I know is kind of rare out there, unfortunately, which is also part of the motivation for me, being able to say it can happen. And it's really nice for everybody when it can happen. So don't give up, because I think it's going to be able to happen more and more. So I found some wonderful people along the way, and this particular case manager came to us in 2011. I had the case manager before that, actually, I remember was at my house. My son was living at my house at the time. And I said, well, what about, if we disagree on something, the case manager and I, over something that's going on with my son? I mean, that's going to happen, right? And he confidently told me that if I would just go along with whatever he wanted, everything would be fine. And I thought, now, wait a minute, this is my house that you're standing in. I just don't get this at all. So I knew I had a lot of work to do, and have been doing it, and found wonderful people. This case manager was with me on Easter a couple of years ago. The last hospitalization my son had was in the spring of 2016. That was his 10th hospitalization. Hopefully that's the last one. We'll knock on wood here. And she was on Easter Sunday. She's a single parent, was vacuuming out his apartment with me because he had gotten evicted, so that we could get that all kind of taken care of. Wasn't sure where he was at that point either. Each of these 10 hospitalizations could have their own stories, but we don't have time for all of that, and some of you can imagine what they are too. So I don't want to discount the grief in that and the struggle with that, but I do want to focus that there is a solution too, and there is hope, and there is a possibility of living a good life. And I have a great life. I have a very happy life. I feel very connected to my son. He's had to tell me about some of the angry things when he was growing up, for instance, that he had to take care of me. And I knew that was coming, and as hard as it was to hear it, I was inside, yes, because I knew it was true, and he had to reclaim himself. And I know also not all families are able to be supportive of their loved ones. So I certainly want to put that out there. So I really feel like at this point, the case manager that my son has, it's like a three-legged stool where all three of us are working together. And it's almost like the two that are talking, include the third somehow, not every detail. So that we're each, for the other two's benefit in our roles, which I am so grateful. I think it's so important. It's such a gift. So since June of 2016, after that last hospitalization and rehab place that he usually would go to afterwards, and these are not in every state. I feel really grateful where we are that they are there. It's 40 units. He was on the waiting list for a couple of years. There's a holistic psychiatrist in the Twin Cities that helped build it. And I had gone to mental health conferences for years because I knew something was going to happen. I just didn't know what and when and, all of that. And so I was so glad when, he'd been in the hospital and, you have to say he's homeless and then, the options open up, which was a horrible thing to have to say, and I have to have talks with him. You're not really homeless, but we have to say that on paper so that you get a place, which he really wanted, an independent place, and I agreed with him. So they serve meals. There's like-minded folks there. I've asked him, is it okay that you're there, thinking that maybe the stigma would get to him, or, he didn't like that. But he just tells me he feels so at home there that for right now, this is working out really well, and I'm really happy for him. And when I get over, he was out of town. He went to Puerto Rico with his dad last winter, and I was taking care of his cats. And his cat, he only has one. And people in the hall would say, oh, who are you? I'm, Gabe's mom helping with the cats. And it was incredible. And whenever I talk to him, he's saying, oh, now someone's at my door. So he's really connected with that group of people. So I'm going to finish up. The last thing that I want to say, well, this is how I feel. Climbing that struggle up the mountain, and not to say that you get to the top, because I don't believe we do. And then, but I just feel like we're all held in this community, our family, and his workers are part of that, and we love them too. There's a woman, Judy Murray. She was on our panel last fall, and she is opening up a Soteria house out east. So if people would like more information on that, you can get in touch with me. So thanks everybody for your attention. We're moving on.
I'm Jason Jones, and I'm grateful for the invitation to be a part of this panel. I've been a police officer in Portland a little over 18 years. I'm the crisis intervention team coordinator in our behavioral health unit. And I've been a crisis intervention team member since 2001. Prior to that, I worked down in California as a probation officer, and I was fortunate enough to work in a multidisciplinary collaborative with social workers and therapists and others that really provided a lot of education and training for me, and really a foundation for the work that I later have been able to do. I did that down there for about 4 years. So wanted to start by talking about a little secret, an insider secret about police that many of you probably don't know. We're not all the same. I know you see the uniform and you assume maybe uniformity, but unfortunately, police agencies across the country are vastly different. The responses you get in the Northeast are different from the Northwest. What agencies are capable of doing are different in the South, in the Midwest. Some of it varies based upon size, others based upon the kind of officers they hire. It just depends. And even in Portland, Oregon, and I don't know how many people are from Multnomah County here, even here, you will get a varied response within the Portland Police Bureau based on the part of the city you're in. Whether, we have 3 precincts: East Precinct, Central Precinct, which is down here, downtown, and North Precinct, which is everywhere else, based upon officer experience, time of day, whether it's at night, in the daytime, the afternoon, and just the officer you get. Just like you're thinking maybe with doctors or with therapists or other programs, it really depends on the program. It really depends on the individual person working. It's that same way with police and police responding to persons in crisis. And I wish it was better than that. I really do, because like you, when I see an awful event that occurs on the news, whether it's local or anywhere across the country, First, I'm sad. I'm sad for the family and their friends. I'm sad because I know then everyone that sees that, it paints a picture of what that response is going to be like maybe for them or their family members. And that makes me also frustrated because there's an opportunity that has been lost where we could have done something better. We could have prevented harm, and we could have perhaps worked to make things better. And that's really that should always be the goal, to reduce, prevent, or make sure that whatever harm is done is the least harm that can be done. And what I mean by that is sometimes police just responding can be traumatic for the family and for the individual. And that in and of itself can be harmful. And so we have to be mindful of that, and aware of the fact that we can produce trauma, just our response. So I wanted to start with that. And I wanted just to, since we're talking about families, I wanted to paint a picture of police. We're like different agencies and different officers. We're like cousins, second cousins, and blended families to one another. There's some commonality, but it's not as strong of a commonality as you might think. So I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing in Portland and what you can expect from a basic police response anywhere, but then also specifically with our model in Portland. We do have an actual crisis response model, and it starts when somebody calls 911 or the non-emergency number that each agency probably has. When you call that, you think you're calling the police. But in many cases, you're not. You're calling another agency. You're calling people that might work there, but they are not actually the police. And for those of you that have called 911, me included, sometimes you get a rather terse response. Somebody on the other end that's rather seemingly uncaring, unfeeling, and trying to extract basic information. And that sets a tone for the rest of the call. And that sometimes can set the path of the incident that follows on a bad trajectory, because then the officer who arrives has no idea about that interaction and now is seeing this tip of the iceberg here and has some assumptions about that and about what you or others might think of them, and it just sets a bad tone right out of the start. So we start with our training with dispatchers, with mental health response and crisis intervention training, and with some degree of trauma-informed questioning, because they need it. They set the tone there first. And that's really the first stair step, if you will, for anyone usually calling, is that call to our telecommunicators, our dispatchers and call takers. And there are times, as we have trained them, that we don't need police. We need a crisis line. And so then we, instead of calling the police and having the police go there, we triage them to a suicide like Lines for Life or our Multnomah County crisis line, instead of having police go, which is great to have that additional training. We then have our patrol officers. All patrol officers in Portland get 44 hours of basic mental health, signs and symptoms training, response training, and resources, which is good. It's not enough in my opinion, but it's a start. Many programs that have crisis intervention teams, that's all they get. We actually have an enhanced crisis intervention team for our higher levels of calls, of crisis calls. Now, the expectation in Portland is that every police officer can interact with persons with mental illness and do so with dignity and respect. But there are higher levels of calls that can swamp the boat of the average officer. And so we volunteer and vet specially trained officers that work patrol to work with people that are suicidal, that have a weapon, that are in mental health facilities, or family members, friends, or others that request and say, I want an ECIT officer. You know your family member. You don't want to go through all of the explanation of the signs and symptoms and everything. You just say, you just push the button, say, ECIT. And then they send one. That's how it works, because you know what your family member or friend needs. And so These officers, again, have that additional training, that extra 40 hours of training, which is extremely helpful. We then also consult with our crisis negotiation team, used to be called hostage negotiation team, and sometimes for even those more complex calls that where we're especially worried about force and a violent interaction, we consult with them or bring them out and bring even more resources to the scene. Enhanced Crisis Intervention Team is what ECIT stands for. Good question. So it's advanced, essentially. And then we have our Behavioral Health Response Team. These are officers paired with clinicians that go after the fact. Officers, whether they're regular patrol or have the extra training, make internal referrals. They are screened, and those that aren't already connected to services will actually go out, because we know most of the time we feel like we do a pretty good job. It's those 1 or 2% that go bad that we want to avoid. And they're the ones that will maybe be in crisis, we're able to resolve it, but they're going to be back in crisis in a few days or next week. And we want to move upstream and prevent that next crisis from occurring. We also have a program for people that are affected with drugs and alcohol and perhaps mental illness. And we have services connected to housing and low barrier housing. It's a whole program. I'm not going to have time to talk about it today because I only have a few minutes, but that's something we're also doing here because we know that a lot of times persons in crisis, part of it, their basic needs aren't being met. And when those basic needs are being met, we can start to treat the underlying issues. We, not the police, but the mental health system. And that, by the way, is funded by the police. So what to expect from the police? I mean, I'm just going to break it down for you. When you have police come, what can they really do? They're going to try to resolve it at the location. They're going to maybe suggest voluntary treatment, whether at one of our walk-in centers, and we have a couple of options in Portland. We don't, and we want to avoid involuntary treatment as much as possible. And that's where we take people into custody and transport them to a secure facility. We want to avoid that. And we now have in our policy that we seek alternatives to incarceration. We are trying to decriminalize the mentally ill. And I know that's strange to hear the police talk about that, but in Portland, Oregon, that's what we are trying to do. And that's actually frustrating for people that call the police and say, but this person, he's doing this, and he vandalized my car. Well, we'll take a police report, but we're not going to be taking that person to jail today. We're going to actually take them to a hospital or a walk-in clinic or try to get them help. And that can be very frustrating for community members that want to see that immediate jail, which, of course, we all know isn't a fix. And over 60% of people in our jails and prisons have some sort of diagnosable mental illness. That's what we want to avoid. That's what we want to shrink. So we try to involve family and friends, figure out what the person's baseline is, help them as much as possible, call out our mobile crisis response team, which are clinicians, to help. Call our ECIT officers to help. We know about resources, figure out who they're plugged in with and try to bring them in. And of course, then we direct them to our crisis lines. I have some of our crisis line sheets at the front, along with a description of our program and my business cards. If you want to see what we're handing people in the moment, handing friends and family, it's up here. And I invite you to take one and look to see if that would be appropriate for your community. One officer that's just a basic patrol officer, as he's going through this training, had this to say. As he goes to these calls, he says, so basically, I'm asking, what am I looking at? What do I do, and where do I take them? Very basic level, that's what police are doing, right? And as much as possible, we want to bring in friends and family because they often know this person, love this person, care about this person, and can help this person through this tough time. Because we realize that we're limited in our tools, and we're only getting a small snapshot in this person's life. I just did something bad. That's okay, though. That's okay. I only have what do I have, about a minute left? 3 minutes? Oh, even better. If I could figure out what I did wrong then. So our ECIT program is new, and I'll tell you that it wasn't because of just us trying to be altruistic that we developed it. Unfortunately, it takes, as it does just about everywhere, a community tragedy. I'm saddened by that, because when I came to Portland and I went through the ECIT, or the basic crisis intervention training back in 2001, I thought to myself, this is it? This is all we get? And that was all we got. So I was thankful in 2013 when we added the second component. We have a baseline for training for all officers, and then we have that additional training for those officers who demonstrate in their career a higher capacity for care. There's something I want to show you. Here's an officer talking to a man who's in crisis in the back of a car in handcuffs. That has always galled me, because here is the stigma of a person who has done nothing wrong except to be in crisis, who has something medically, a medical issue, not a criminal justice issue, in the back of a police car. And I've always felt that when I've said, you're not in any trouble. Well, everybody around thinks this person's in trouble because they're in handcuffs. They certainly are thinking, well, gee, I'm in crisis, but I'm in the back of a police car in handcuffs. I'm in trouble, right? So we've recently partnered with our ambulance transport service. They now do all of our transports, or the vast majority of them. There are always exceptions to the rule, but the vast majority now go in an ambulance as opposed to a police car. And I'm thankful for that, because now I can say you're not in any trouble, and in fact, I have persons here that are medically trained that are going to help you. And that's a small step, and that might seem like a small thing, but to a lot of people that affects, and to the families and friends that are around a person in crisis, when those unfortunate times occur, when a person is going involuntarily or voluntarily, it's better that it's done this way. I think it's much more humane. So I don't have time to talk about our behavioral health response teams, but the goal for our teams, essentially the follow-up work that's done, is to reduce frequency of police contacts and also to connect them to the resources that are available out there. I could talk about this. I'm very passionate about this. It's an issue that has touched me deeply for personal reasons and professional. But if ever you need anything, I have my business card here. I have some other information, and I would love to talk further. So thank you very much.
My name is Cynthia Brown. I come first and foremost as a parent. I'm actually really encouraged to see both families and, I assume, many clinicians here. Really encouraged. I come from, as I said, I'm first and foremost here as a parent, but I come from my own psychoanalytic training from the Institute of Contemporary Psychoanalysis in Los Angeles, as well as have worked in residential psychiatric treatment for Bridges to Recovery in Los Angeles. So when this, as well as my own meditation practice since my 20s, this has all informed me to be able to be there for my son when he needed me. My first ISPS conference was in 2010, 3 months after my son's hospitalization and diagnosis of schizophrenia. I need to preface this story by saying that I have my son's permission to talk about him as long as I don't give his name or the name of the graduate school that he currently attends. I'll be using the word recovery throughout, and what I mean by recovery is an emergent, cohesive experience of well-being marked by a sense of possibility and meaning in life. This talk this morning is one that I want to direct particularly to the relatives of those with lived experience. And for those clinicians, please listen with an ear for that. It's based on what I would have wanted to know 7 years ago that I've since learned about my son's gradual process of recovery. If I had written notes to myself from the vantage point of now, they would read, make room for the process, know that I influence the process, consider how I influence the process, and remember that engagement is particular to my son's needs, not my own needs. I began my caregiver role, like many family members do, by relying on clinicians to advise the direction of my son's treatment. In my professional role as a clinician, I know that clinical teams place families in a peripheral, adjunctive role at best, frequently missing opportunities like family education that could very well facilitate their patient's healing process. I also noticed that families inadvertently or intentionally marginalize themselves, relying on medical professionals to direct treatment. Families need guidance. I did too. When my son's inner world fragmented, it was only 12 hours later when the psychiatrist delivered the diagnosis. It was devastating to our entire family. My son would, many years later, describe his state of mind at that crisis point as putrid, shell-shocked, brain emptied, soul death. My state was profound sorrow and grief because I believed his recovery was tenuous and his future gravely uncertain. One key event during that time jolted me out of my crisis mode. It was a casual comment by a mother from NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. She suggested that I could make room for this. In other words, shift my objective from a make this different to an approach of allow this to be. I knew then from meditation practice that focused attention to the present moment quiets my mind, anchors and helps me to open to whatever life circumstance is happening. At that time, it meant that I could allow my son to be just as he was, pressure off, my needs for him to be, or his condition to be better now, halted. Radical acceptance did not mean that I would no longer schedule the tasks necessary for treatment or wish him to be someday returned to his life. It was an attitudinal shift that allowed me to focus on the process of whatever happened to be his state of mind and mood in any given moment. I then created a home environment of asylum, a time and place to heal, a facilitating environment, including relationship with me where I provided emotional support and guidance so he could begin to reorganize his world. Years afterward, my son would tell me that he appreciated this time when he felt the pressure was off. Radical acceptance was the first best step as his caregiver. Another step included ideas from a book I found called Personal Therapy by Gerald Hogarty that cites his team's evidence-based research and defines the psychosocial approach for treatment based on adjunct treatment modalities, including family participation. Hogarty's research focuses on phases of recovery and indicates there's an improved chance of recovery when families are informed. The takeaway for me was that healing is possible, and as a parent, I could be a useful contributor to the therapeutic process. As I became more informed, the more I trusted my own psychoanalytic education. Not so much classical literature associated with the interpretation of unconscious motivations and meanings, but the contemporary body of literature that focuses on intersubjective mutual influence within relationships and systems, that describes elements and processes that facilitate healing environments, promotes affect attunement, sensory processing, and processes of change. Over time, I synthesized these ideas and wove them into the practical routine of my son's everyday life as we lived together. Before I describe two different memories from that period, please know that they are specific to my son's condition as well as his resources at the time. The activities are not prescriptive and only meant to serve as examples for what I want to illustrate as receptive and active modes of engagement, ideas of how caregivers might respond to the process. In Christopher Bolas's book, Catch Them Before They Fall, Psychoanalysis of Breakdown, he writes that the analyst, and I would add caregiver, must know how to operate within both what he calls the maternal and paternal order, providing dual functions, one that quietly receives the implicit communications of the person in breakdown, and one that supports the patient's ego health and attempts to keep the patient functioning in reality. I thought of these dual functions as providing sustained empathic attunement to my son's emotional and subjective states, as well as providing unobtrusive structure, consistency, and time limit setting. These functions evolved between us over time and were always in response to what I sensed my son needed. I remember these experiences simply as our time sitting in the dark and walking in the neighborhood. During his year at home, he was emotionally fragile, highly sensitive to stimulation, had little motivation to self-care, much less do anything outside the home. We kept home quiet, distractions to a minimum. After dinner, in the living room, he and I sat on opposite couches, sometimes in the dark and in long silence. Other times, I'd listen to him with little comment or briefly try to understand the emotional underpinnings of what he seemed to be saying. At first, he focused on behavioral anxieties and needs. As months passed, he eventually expressed emotional concerns, doubts about his future, confusion about his condition, regrets that life seemed to be passing him by. I'd comment simply, "Sounds like you're worried. You don't know how to get through this yet. You don't know what decision to make." The act of listening seemed to calm him when he was most distressed. Over the years, he and I began to identify more complex emotional conflicts that haunted him. In time, he identified conflicts on his own. Conflicts were often the early signs of distress, and he learned that he could preemptively recognize and then manage them before stressors became overwhelming, something he integrated and uses to this day. Then there were walks in the neighborhood. Since his motivation at the hospital was low to none, in a gentle effort to motivate, I coaxed him to walk outside to the corner. We live on the corner. He accomplished that over the first few weeks. Over the course of months, we walked at his pace, incrementally further around the neighborhood, while I identified opportunities for decisions at each juncture. What direction now? How far do you want to go? Is it time to stop? These questions required that he organize decisions, albeit small ones at first. I held a silent, implicit attitude of, "You can do this." He needed to rely on my confidence when his was low. These micro decision-making walks were among the beginning of other more significant choices, followed by incremental steps. Steps became complex decisions, and with these he gradually learned to slightly push his limit, and equally important, identify his own limits in order to manage stress. What else was important on my journey? As a parent and caregiver, I had to be aware of my own edge states, a term that I learned from Joan Halifax, a Zen abbot and anthropologist who worked extensively with people in the dying process. For her, edge states are experiences that call us to our edge and are the times when our own identity or sense of reality is challenged. When we are in the presence of someone who experiences extreme states, we are ultimately faced with our own edge states. We are intimately confronted with an urgent need to relieve their distress and the futility of not being able to do so. There's a number of unproductive ways we can do that, but personally, including ones we're all familiar with, like fight, flight, or freeze, I personally learned that unless I'm able to steady myself, I have little ability to help my son steady and organize himself. I needed to be present to the circumstances in order to not be overwhelmed by them. In conclusion, my notes to myself 7 years ago and to this point would be, again, make room for the process, know that I influence this process, consider how I influence this process, and remember that engagement is particular to my son's needs, not my own needs. And I'll add one more. Acknowledge and respect my son's inherent wisdom. Thank you. And I want to introduce Georgia Case, mother.
I really was going to introduce myself simply as Mom. It's really been a dream of mine as a family member to have a large audience of listening and empathetic therapists and doctors. Wow. Bravo. Where have you been all my life? It's been an amazing conference, as usual. Bravo, ISPS. I was so moved and inspired. Darn that Michael Haynes. He was just beautiful yesterday. And on the experience panel, and when he talked about his journey and mentioning his mom. 5 years ago this fall, my son had a psychotic break at college in San Francisco after graduating 1 year early from high school, the only one out of 800 students to do so in Southern California. And living alone on a vegan diet, not sleeping, and using drugs, he began hearing voices and experiencing extreme states of paranoia. In that 5 years, our journey has not been easy. It's been extremely difficult, sad, confusing, frustrating, and heartbreaking. I've sought help and treatment from a wide variety of outpatient clinics, at major research hospitals, residential treatment centers, wilderness and experiential programs, and I even ran my own outpatient clinic for a while, very unsuccessfully, I might add. So bravo to you all for teaching me that. My son's extreme states have evolved profoundly over the years, from hearing voices in intense distress to fixed delusions that he speaks many foreign languages fluently and is a successful entrepreneur that makes millions of dollars with his creative ideas. They've gone from very sad and unhappy experiences to now quite joyful experiences. He has been unable to speak at times and could not sleep for days and months, causing him great distress and agitation. Very painful to watch this. His condition was exacerbated by cannabis, and it took a long time to understand that using THC had a profound impact on his functionality. And undergoing substance treatment has been a very important part of his recovery. I often say that I wear 3 distinct hats. And when I talk to clinicians, I'll tell them which hat I'm wearing so they know the difference. I wear my consumer's hat. I'm a private pay, which has distinct disadvantages, actually, and a consumer's hat, advocacy hat, and a mom's hat. in interacting with my son's care and treatment. I've recently taken on some new hats that I'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. If there's one defining constant in my experiences interfacing with so many different types of professionals within the system over the past 5 years, sadly, is the profound lack of interest in our family's stories and a curiosity of our roles and our potential and what we do specifically to help ourselves and our loved one. I've rarely been talked to by anyone in the professional world about my fears, my concerns, let alone my frustrations and my grief, and how it might affect my son's treatment. I'm rarely provided with interesting or relevant resources to learn about psychosis, studies, or information about helpful practices for family members. I almost am never invited to have a meaningful place at the table with the treatment team, unless I ask, and I ask, and I ask again. And rarely are we able to explore our family's strengths and opportunities for providing for my son. But that won't stop me from continuing to ask, and that's the reason that I'm here at ISPS today, is to take responsibility myself. The journey has also really, rarely has anyone asked about my ability to care for my son. What can I pay? What steps are being taken to care for him in the near term and the long term? To be fair, early in my son's treatment, there was a wilderness program in Colorado that I'll give a shout out to, Open Sky, that did some incredible work helping families to explore mindfulness techniques, processing of emotions, reducing stress, and training the parents in a parallel process. They actually had a webinar, I think they still do it today, where every weekend all families, past and present, were on a mindfulness webinar, and then people could just talk about what they were thinking or questions that they had. And they actually give alumni weekends today that they offer to continue that treatment. ISPS has made a difference too in providing me with these practices that I would otherwise not be exposed to. And it's really helped shape my vision for what my son might benefit from. And I really, really urge you all to continue to contribute your work to the webinars and the blogs and the listserv, which has been really helpful. And that's where I met Matt Stevenson, whose loss has been profound to this organization. He was one of those people that was willing to talk to me privately and share his ideas, and those, emails that he sent to me are really precious. I really, plan to save them. And that's really what led me to Cynthia Brown. Her family experience and sisterhood of personal experience had a profound impact on helping me to keep going, in spite of the enormous challenges of keeping my son safe and finding appropriate care and treatment for him. Our family experience was also marked by two completely divergent views on treatment and care for psychosis within our families. And we couldn't use the word psychosis or symptoms or medication, and it was really quite difficult. I think one of the cautions that I would say in our groups, that we be really mindful about our opinions about the medical model and the non-medical model. Everyone has something to contribute, and I think sometimes our word choice can be very stigmatizing and judgmental, and this can have a really significant impact on families as they're making their choices. A year ago, my son decided to go and visit Cooper Reese in North Carolina. I feel very privileged that the director took my invitation to come to the conference this weekend. My son had not been eligible years before because of an acute substance issue. On the morning we awoke, I was taken by my son's to go to Cooper East. I was taken by my son's calm and careful packing of his bags. Wilderness therapy had taught him a lot about keeping his gear organized. We had breakfast at a nearby bakery, and there was little apprehension. I awoke that morning to briefly confirm that Donald Trump was elected president. With Herculean grit and determination, I promised myself that I would not overtake my thoughts and emotions about this tragic event. My son was with me, he was safe, and there was hope that after many years of bouncing in and out of treatments and hospitalizations, he might find some stability, insight, and consistent care. Upon his first visit with his therapist, he cried with relief. I'm so glad I'm here. Over the years of looking for appropriate treatment for my son, one of the things that struck me is how few communities there are in this country for an adult to live that has the step down and transitional opportunities for care. It's something that was really important to me. I want to fast forward to a couple of things that I've been working on, and I'm looking forward to sharing them on the ISPS listserv as we move forward in my son's care. In the last 3 months, he's made profound changes and starting to make decisions for himself. He is clearer, happier, and participating at a very high level, and he's working very closely on his RAP recovery plan. What I've discovered is this is my opportunity to really participate in the future of his care. I've set up a special needs trust, not something that's just for the rich and famous, but much like a living will, it spells out the wishes of what he wants to do and how. Within that RAP plan, I'm working to develop a social network that will re-engage our family members to provide the emotional, practical, financial support that we desperately need. This social network is operating under what my son wishes, his desires for family connection and support that's very difficult to ask for. I'm sort of calling it my family circle, but I think he might like social network better. During this empowerment phase, we're really taking a focus on his rights to be treated with dignity and respect, his needs and wishes related to his living, care, and treatment options, and his responsibilities. This is his recovery. We're also activating a advanced psychiatric care directive. They're available in 23 states, so you might look in your own state to see if they exist, as a legal tool to be able to, again, take forth his rights as he wishes. During this empowerment phase, while it might sound a little bit housekeeping to be thinking about these documents, they've actually given me and my son an opportunity to work together and to really demonstrate that I am thinking about his care in very small doses, empowering him to start making choices. And it's really quite liberating to see this newfound connection. And when I talked to him a little bit about whether he'd be comfortable giving me medical power of attorney, it gave us an opportunity to talk about, are you going to make me go somewhere? I went, no, this is an opportunity for you to start deciding. I'm just there to support you. And this has been a really great turning point for me and my son. And it's also given us something to work with the treatment team, because this is something they don't do, and that yet they see value in having it done. And so I will report back on the success of this. So far, my son's been very excited about the opportunity to figure out ways to reconnect with our family members who really do struggle with what to do and how they can support. And sometimes it really is something as simple as sending him a text or making plans to visit or even just sending him an email. I really want to thank ISPS for taking the time and the energy to start incorporating families into its programming in the last couple of years. It's really, I consider it an extension of my family, and I hope that you will too. Thank you.
I've learned quite a lot as a parent from this conference of a child who is gender fluid, who struggles with anxiety and PTSD. However, there's a however, I've noticed that there's been a bit of, for lack of a better word, I feel that a part of me has not been included, and that is that the part of me that is a partner of somebody who suffered. My husband chose to end his life 2 years ago and struggled far longer than I knew him. I didn't realize that he was struggling, that he was suffering, until we were into our marriage, and his illness became progressively more complex, and he suffered greater and greater until his choice to end that suffering in the way that he did. So I'm just wondering, I have a couple of questions. My first question is the Advanced Psychiatric Directive that you were talking about, does that include a component for partners, or is that just a parental thing? Okay, good. Thank you. And issues for partners are different than issues for parents. I know this from my own experience, and I know it from talking with other people who are partners and parents. And so it's I think, important to represent that and to explore that. And if anybody has any suggestions for resources, I would greatly appreciate that.
I'd like to add your name and email so you can be in touch with these folks. I will just say, because I know that has come up, and actually one of our members who recently his life ended prematurely, Paul Peacock, his wife actually was going to, that was one of the things she had been interested in. Right now she's in her, I don't know what's going on with her grief process, but that does come up, and we just need a critical mass of people to keep it happening and reaching out. I don't know if you guys.
I'll just add that we have had a person that was a partner on the panel, and it was very, very powerful, and I apologize we don't have that today. Yeah.
I would also say, I know my comments on the listserv, the ISPS listserv, regarding NAMI has met with a lot of controversy because of NAMI's conceptualization of the illness and the brain component of that. However, you know, I have found the advocacy and especially the support has, and I have to say, I come in with an ability to sort of translate, like leave what I don't like and take what I do. I find that they have been an enormous support for me in terms of just understanding and knowing how to listen and be able to respond in a thoughtful, skillful way. So that would be one source, and particularly in West Los Angeles, where I live, I know it's like police officers. Every chapter is different. Every chapter has a different personality, but that would be one resource that I would.
I actually am a part of NAMI, and I'm a facilitator, and I've checked with the Oregon, I'm from Oregon.
Uh-huh.
And the state, they don't recognize that there are different issues for partners and parents. And so there aren't specific resources within NAMI for
I didn't know that.
At least
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
You bring up a really valid point to.
I think also if you become a member of ISPS, again, posting stuff on the listserv, or if there's something you want to start, and we have our Facebook and our Instagram and all kinds of things. So if that's something that you're interested in developing, because since that resource is not there, that we'd be happy to help promote it or send it to our vast list. That it's nationwide, but still it could be a virtual list of people. So
There was just one question I wanted to address here, that is there a group or meetings for families in each state? And aside from NAMI, we would love to have resources for, have a person in each state that could feed resources to us on a national level and be able to pass that out. But to my knowledge, it's in areas of the country that Jessica can talk about.
yeah, right now we don't have This is us right here, our national meeting. We do have some regional branches, but we all come together here, and we hope to inspire you to go back to where you are. Any other questions, comments? Okay, Chelsea, and then in the back, and then we probably have to.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chelsea. I wanted to thank you guys for coming for specifically two main reasons: to validate what we maybe as therapists or treaters or whomever are doing right, but also to point out the stuff we oops on, or we haven't even thought about yet, or that we ourselves are doing, and can hear it in a different way that we can help someone else maybe also do that. So I think, again, we all grow together. So I really appreciate you guys' input.
Yes, thank you.
This is to Officer Jason, is that? I'm part of a group that has helped to inspire what we call truth and reconciliation circles to help bridge those who give service and those who receive it. And one of the ones we did was between givers and receivers of mental health care. And we're hoping to hold that quarterly, so as people come out of the systems, they can share what worked and what didn't work. And that would be very powerful for the community to see if your tax dollars are working, and for those that are trying to increase and improve their service. And I think it would be an amazing first, probably in the country, if the police force, as an effort to increase, and not just asking specific individuals, but bring the community and those who have received those services quarterly, and the policemen who've given those services, because both sides have a story that needs to be heard to bridge that. So that's my challenge to you, to be the first in the country to commit to maybe a year of holding these quarterly truth and reconciliation circles.
Where is it?
The Rethinking Psychiatry, it sponsored the first one right here in Portland. NAMI in Vancouver, Renegade NAMI, sponsored one recently. We would be glad to support you in creating that.
Challenge accepted.
Wow, that is totally awesome. All right, we do have to have lunch. Does anyone have like a burning question? They just have to. All right. All right, Joe, last word. Age before beauty.
Hi, I'm Joe Abrams. I've been at this for a while. I have a comment and a question. The comment has to do with the role of earnestness versus the role of passion. We all are very earnest in the business. It's when we get to our passion, and that passion is one which enables us to become connected with ourselves and the other person. Only connect would be the thesis. The question I have has to do with the local program. Do you have a built-in research and development endeavor connected with your work, the work of responding to a crisis? The telephone calls and you open your mouth and say something, the other person hears something. That's the pregnant moment. And do you have a research endeavor relative to that process, and an ongoing training program for people who've been in the business for some time.
Are you guys doing research on your?
Oh, good. I think that was for me. We have a crime analyst that helps us with our data points. We also have partners with Portland State University, and we're always looking to develop that further. But it's all about how we're able to gather those data points in a way that doesn't interfere with the actual service delivery. And so that's one of the struggles, is as we're trying to always be mindful of our outcomes and how we're providing service, how do we collect our data without getting in the way of the actual service delivery? And so we struggle with that. We're not perfect at it. We're always looking at better ways of doing it. But I can tell you that we're using more data and we're using much more research than we ever did before. But we're in our infancy, I will tell you. We're not as advanced as other professions in that area.
Thank you very much, everybody. There's box lunch downstairs for everybody today. Thank you.